Okay, and we're live and we're sitting here with the infamous Dan Coniglio. And I'm really excited about this interview because you and me have a history. We went to Humber College together and studied music. And like we were reminiscing earlier, it was about 20 years ago, right?
Yes. Yeah, next year it'll be 20 years ago.
That's amazing. It feels like maybe 2 weeks.
I know.
We still have Humber homework to do.
You still look great.
Thanks. So I wanted to actually speak with you because I know you as a really good bass player. You do some producing on your own, right, for some music.
That's right.
You are the retail manager at McQuade. And I know you've always been a cool dude, but recently you've taken that seriously and literally you've chased the cold and you've gotten into some yoga as well. So I think just right off the top, I wanted to ask you, what was the switch from music into wellness? I mean, they're still under a holistic arts category, which is great, but did something happen or what happened there?
Yeah, something did happen. When I graduated from Humber, I wasn't really in great physical shape. While I was at Humber, my body kind of went to the wayside to study music. And I kind of continued to go that way, and it started catching up to me. And around 30 years old, I started realizing, I need to do something about my body, because if I want to play music for a long time, I want my body to be in good working order. Yeah. My family has a history with arthritis and some conditions, so I really wanted to cut those off at the pass, get ahead of them before they caught up with me. And a couple of friends had been recommending yoga to me for quite some time, and I never tried it. I didn't know where to go, and it just happened that a yoga studio opened down the street from where I was living, and a couple friends said, you should go try this thing out. They have hot yoga classes there. So I went in there and I tried it out, and that was when everything started. I mean, I was terrible at it. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't bend down and touch my toes. I could barely do any of the postures. I hid at the back of the class for probably the first few years, just trying to get it together, because a lot of people that go to yoga are maybe former dancers or former gymnasts, and I was none of those things. I was never athletic in the least. I've been a musician. That's what I had focused my efforts on. So, but I really liked the way that the practice made me feel. After class, I would just feel so happy and blissful. And as Joe Rogan says, I would want to call people and apologize for things because I'd feel so good after class.
The endorphins are just kicking in.
Yeah, and there was something satisfying about seeing that pile of sweat on the mat. And it got out of a bit of that, it got out of the competitive thing that maybe happens in gyms. The way the teachers spoke was coming from a mindful place and about like self-acceptance and how you're speaking to yourself and being kind to yourself. And I really liked that because I maybe had some damage there, and the way I spoke to myself, my inner critic was pretty harsh, and it really helped me change the tone of voice in which I was speaking to myself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because musicians, I mean, music itself is a mental activity, it's an emotional activity, but it's also very much a physical activity, and that's something that's not brought to light a lot. I mean, especially when we were at Humber, it was, learn your music, learn your theory, learn your performance, learn your composing, but there was very little talk about the physical aspect of music. I remember just recently watching Joe Rogan with Travis Barker, the drummer from Blink 182, and he was saying that he actually does boxing because boxing, working with the shoulders actually prepares him for drumming. So when he goes out on tour, he's actually physically prepared to do the tour, and he'll come back with more energy and less wear and tear by working out rather than not. Even James Hetfield from Metallica was saying now in these later years they actually bring fitness people on board with them when they go to tour, so they're actually taking it more seriously. So in terms of just energy, the physical attribute, we use our fingers a lot. That also maybe exercises we could do every day. That's really important for musicians, right? And I'm sure you found that out now that you've done yoga for some years. You've seen the way your body's changed, the way your muscles have changed. That would really help musicians, right, to do something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many habitual movement patterns that you get into just by playing your instrument. So learning how to change those movement patterns or how to stretch out from them, because I started getting little bits of carpal tunnel symptoms while I was at Humber, and that's when I started stretching for the first time, just to get rid of some of those symptoms, and realizing, oh, some of the stretching and strengthening can actually help my body perform better. I think a lot of musicians, this is definitely the case for me. I became a musician because I sucked at athletics. Like, I didn't fit in with that crowd. I wasn't, I was a pudgy kid. I didn't fit in with the athletic crowd. I didn't make the basketball team. So all of us are trying to find something in life, and I think a lot of us that didn't excel maybe in the academics or in the athletics eventually found the arts.
Yeah.
Or we had that creative spark to begin with, and we found the arts. So I had a bit of a distaste for athletics because I associated with jocks and with the people that used to pick on me in high school.
Sure, shallow mentality and no stereotypes.
Yeah, definitely. So, yoga was one way in where I saw people speaking a different kind of language that was far more welcoming. And then hearing other people come along, like the Joe Rogans of the world or the Aubrey Marcuses or whoever it is that are clearly athletes, but they have a beautiful, open mind when it comes to their perspective on the world, and don't have that kind of jock mentality that I had experienced before. And it definitely was an invitation into that world.
Nice. Yeah, it's a very sharing and caring perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they have, rather than comparing and competitiveness, like you're saying.
Yeah.
That's good. So when you did the yoga, did you sort of start to research on your own, and then did you find a yogi or a mentor for that? Or
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was going to Moto Yoga in Markham, the studio down the street from me, and sweating it out in the hot classes for a while, and that was a great introduction. The hot classes. I was so stiff that being in that heat helped loosen my body up.
Yeah.
After a while, I started craving some variety, trying something different. And the great thing about Moto Yoga is, although they've got their thing that they do really well, they're also open to other lineages and other styles of yoga. Because just like music, yoga has all these different styles. There's not one kind of yoga. There's all these different lineages. All of them have something different to offer.
Yeah.
So I went to different classes, and I went to this Friday night class, 6:30 Friday nights, with this teacher Yumi Chung and her husband Scott Peterson, who is a musician. And Scott would play guitar and sing in the class, and Yumi would teach. Yeah. And first time I went to their class, she spoke it much more spiritually than some of the other teachers. Yeah. And I wasn't totally open to that yet. My first class, I was thinking, are these hippies like full of crap, or or is this for real? But the class felt so good, I kept going back to it. I ended up befriending the two of them. Scott and I had a lot in common because he was actually primarily a bassist as well, and he had gone to U of T for jazz. Nice. So we became friends, and then I ended up following those two all over the world. I went on a yoga retreat to Bali with them, and I went on a yoga retreat to India with them. And being around them and learning their teachings was just such a healing experience that I went to that 6:30 Friday night class almost religiously, as often as I could.
And Friday night, that's prime night, right, for social settings?
Yeah. But instead of going out and getting intoxicated or drinking too much beer or eating some bad food, I would go and spend time with them, and I feel really healthy after.
Yeah.
So it felt really good to do that. And after a while, I wanted to go even deeper than that. So I asked Yumi, if I want to learn more, what should I do? And she suggested I take a teacher training and gave me a few people that I could study with, and I ended up studying with this fellow named Francois Raoul in Rochester, New York, at a studio called Open Sky, and I did my 200-hour teacher training with him there.
Amazing. This style of yoga that you do, you said it's Moto Yoga? That's the name of
the name of the studio is Moto Yoga. I haven't done Moto Yoga's training. I may do it at some point because they have their own training program, but the training that I did is based in a lineage called Iyengar. But it's not specifically, I'm not a certified Iyengar teacher. I just learned from someone who went through that lineage, but the training I took was non-dogmatic. We learned a lot of different aspects of yoga, learned a lot about ourselves, but it's not really a particular lineage.
Okay. Is there anything unique about this, even though there's no certain lineage, or that you can separate it maybe from other forms of yoga? Was it a summary?
Yeah,
of
well,
them,
I'd say that it's based in Iyengar. That's definitely unique. And I also did a lot of specific training on breath work.
Okay.
I did a pranayama training at Open Sky Yoga. Pranayama is breathing exercises, yogic breathing exercises. So I did a lot of work on that specifically. So I have a lot of training specifically in breathing exercises and then the yoga poses as well.
Okay. How important is the breath? I mean, I'm understating it, but
yeah,
from someone like yourself,
thank you for asking.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's number one of anything. Every breath is a moment to come, is an opportunity to come into the present moment. That's why breath is so important, because it's this thing that's happening unconsciously all the time. And the way to awaken your consciousness is to make the unconscious conscious.
Okay.
And breath is happening unconsciously in every moment. So every time you take a conscious breath, you're stepping further into the present moment. And you're awakening the unconscious. And I feel like breath is the key to unlocking control over your physiology, to unlocking control over your nervous system. Because how you breathe is how you feel.
Okay.
And it's so obvious. It's literally right under our noses that...
No pun intended.
Yeah, pun totally intended. That we can miss it sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's the biggest thing to take control of your life and your physiology and your mood.
So breath is primarily automatic, right? It's the what we deem the subconscious system in the body that's facilitating breath. But then you're saying you can actually take control of this, make it conscious, use it as an exercise to achieve, say, the present moment, to achieve maybe clarity of mind, to slow down the pace of things.
Yes.
And then go back automatic. Are you able to reprogram breath if it's sort of been set up incorrectly, or like if someone by nature is breathing too fast, right? And maybe they're not breathing from their diaphragm, they're breathing from their stomach, right? They say it's better to breathe from the chest.
Right.
So using this awareness, are you able to reprogram it and get it back automatic?
You can totally retrain your breathing patterns. The same as you can retrain your movement patterns. If whatever is habitual was probably created unconsciously, and by making it conscious and training it, you can start to turn it around. Your breathing pattern can change. There are so many different exercises, what we can do with our breath. Sometimes it's about calming it down. Sometimes it's about getting you fired up for activity. Okay. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Your natural breathing is a function of your autonomic nervous system. So autonomic meaning it happens on its own. Yeah. So by making it conscious, you're starting to dive into the nervous system and take control over the nervous system. So by simply, the recipe is pretty simple. Making your exhales longer than your inhales takes you into a parasympathetic nervous system state. What that means is relaxation. Okay. So if you make your exhale twice as long as your inhale, you are going to trigger relaxation. Okay. And you can do this by counting, or classic musician thing, do it with a metronome. Turn the metronome on, inhale for 3 seconds, exhale for 6 seconds. And that will wind you down and cool you down and take you in that relaxation state.
Does the metronome reading matter, like tempo itself? Or?
Yeah, I just put it at 60 beats, so it's just the beat is falling 1 beat per second. Okay. So yeah, I just set it at 60. So I'm just counting 1 beat per second, or you could use a timer, whatever you like. Sure. I create breathing tracks, like little bits of music or like a beat over a drone that people breathe along to. That's what I use in my classes.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Or you can go to the opposite end, like something like the Wim Hof breathing. Yeah. Gets you fired up for activity. It's great to do first thing in the morning to help you go into your day. So you can walk into work fully energized and ready to face whatever stressors might be coming at you. It gets you in the sympathetic. It actually takes you on a ride through the entire nervous system, but the state you end up is highly energized and highly focused.
Okay.
So any short breathing, when breath is short, you're stimulating the sympathetic, which is the active part of the nervous system.
Okay.
So short breathing focused on inhales takes you into active zones. Long breathing focused on exhales takes you into passive zones.
So a lot of athletes must be in the active zone, right?
Yeah.
When they're performing. Musicians as well, if you're being energetic on stage.
Yeah, you can definitely get in that. Or you can find this sweet middle ground, right? Right in the middle of the nervous system, where you're not in the super high active state, but you're not in the super low passive state, and that's kind of this flow state where your breathing is relaxed but steady, and you're totally present, and you have energy, but it's a relaxed energy.
And are you sort of playing with fire by doing this? Like, can you cause damage to your body by playing with different breathing tempos?
I'd say with any medicine, there's always a risk in taking any kind of medicine.
Sure.
This is one of the teachings I love from Ayurveda, which is like yogic medicine, which is that the medicine is the dose. That's what the medicine is the dosage.
Sure.
It's not just the medicine that's doing the work, it's how much of it you're using. Correct. So yes, you have to be wise in how you're using it. You can overdo it with anything.
Yeah.
Too much medicine is poison. You can actually kill yourself by drinking too much water.
Sure. Yeah.
You can make yourself pass out by not breathing enough. You can over-oxygenate yourself and start having some pretty intense symptoms. It's probably pretty difficult to do ridiculous damage, but there are ways people do it, like especially with the Wim Hof breathing. If people haven't studied it well and are doing it under the wrong conditions, like because it's such an extreme kind of breath work, you're never supposed to do it when you're driving or operating heavy machinery or in the water, because there's a chance when you're breathing at that high of a level that you could make yourself pass out.
Sure.
So you wouldn't want to be doing it. So that's where there's a little bit of danger. If you were, hyper oxygenating yourself while driving a car or in water or something like that, that's where it can be dangerous.
Correct. So don't practice these things on the highway. Driving.
Yeah, but that particular style, the Wim Hof method of breathing, is best to do just sitting on the ground or in your bed, lying down, not even standing up. Sure. But some of the other breathwork practices, like long exhales, those are safe to do pretty much anywhere.
Sure. Like a good friend of mine says, practice moderation in moderation. Right?
Yes.
Get a good balance.
Mm-hmm.
There was a gentleman I'd studied briefly with once, a Qigong named Robert Peng. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's currently residing, I think, in New York. And he had done a 100-day water fast, which was fully supervised by his mentor, who was a master of martial arts at a monastery in China. And he deflected, and he actually trained Robert Peng when he was very young. And he told him, you can go into martial arts or you can go into healing therapy. And he actually chose healing therapy using martial arts teaching. So he did this 100-day water fast, and one of the things he mentioned was his breathing slowed down so that one breath was almost maybe 20 minutes. Wow. He was able to slow it down that much. Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, not immediately. Through training, it got into some days where he was just basically lying down in the dark. Because when you're doing a 100-day water fast, you don't want to exert yourself, right? So his master had him lie down. He had some initial nutrition, but then fended him off that, just gave him water. And then coming out of the fast, he reintroduced the nutrition to him. And he said, you actually get to that point where one breath dramatically slows down. And that's sort of preservation in itself, right? I remember reading, I think, one of the Hindu teachings saying that each person is born with a limited amount of breaths. Now, if you believe that, once you've completed that number, pass off, you die, and you go on to reincarnate. So slowing down your breath could definitely lead to some sort of preservation, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than rapid breathing, which would do the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that same philosophy as well. But also in the yogic tradition, you have kriyas, which are cleansing breaths, something like breath of fire, which is Bastrika, which is quite fast. It's Kundalini yogis practice that nearly every morning as a cleansing, and that's speeding up the breath. But I believe by practicing various pranayamas that your body will become more efficient at working with oxygen. It definitely does that. They've measured this in the Wim Hof method, that over time, because you do these really long breath retentions where you're going without breathing for so long, that your body becomes more efficient at working with oxygen, so you can actually breathe less during the day and get more. There's also another kind of breath work called Buteyko, who's all about just taking tiny little sips of air and becoming really efficient with the amount of oxygen we're using. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, whether there are a limited amount of breaths to each human life, I don't know.
That's one of the philosophies,
sure yet,
for sure. And Robert Peng was also getting into things like grabbing nutrients from air through breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not eating, if you're fasting, and if you just have water, I guess the body may resort to plan B, which is a different type of intake on nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was his philosophy, so
yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard similar things like that. That's amazing. 100-day water fast and a 20-minute breath. I've been able to get to about a 3-minute breath, like one single breath lasting 3 minutes.
Oh wow!
Chopping into all the parts. 20 minutes. Yeah, that's a really extremely high level. That would take a really dedicated amount of practice. But Dr. Svoboda is an Ayurvedic doctor. He has a book called Prakriti. And in that book, he talks about yogis doing exactly that, getting so efficient at breathing, so efficient at prana. This is the concept in yoga. The prana is all that feeds you. Being able to take enough prana out of the air to sustain them. And eventually, by the end of the book, he's talking about some pretty far out concepts of like yogis letting off nothing but mercury. Somehow being able to use mercury and the prana of mercury to sustain themselves and nothing else besides oxygen and mercury.
And for regular people who lead regular lives, it sounds strange to them, right? It sounds far out. It might sound abstract, but it's only because maybe we haven't delved in it enough, or we're sort of distanced from it, or once we see it happen, and maybe science proves it, then we're like, hey, of course it was,
Yeah, most of us have never come remotely close to exercising that level of discipline in our lives, because our culture is about reaching for comfort constantly. So, even doing simple breathing exercises can be challenging for people, let alone something like a 100-day water fast. But if you travel to India and see some of the yogis and, they're out there doing tree pose for 3 hours. You leave in the morning, they're in tree pose. You come back later in the day, they're still in the same pose. You start to get a taste for what human beings are capable of doing when they really dedicate themselves to a practice and really give it their unflinching focus.
Sure, and sometimes tree pose on a pole, right?
Right. Yeah.
Taking the next level.
On a pole for sure.
If I can segue into Wim Hof, that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about. With Wim Hof, I know a little bit about him. One thing that fascinated me about him, which maybe you can shed some light on, because you actually trained with him personally, right?
Yes.
A lot of his education on dealing with cold and breath as well, right? And playing around with the immunity system, he said actually just came to him from being in the cold. It's not like he went to university and studied this or researched from books. I'm sure he did all of that after. He was very sort of curious, and he checked out different things the world had to offer in terms of studies and disciplines, religions, etc. But he actually said he would actually go out into the cold, and the cold almost spoke to him and gave him these inspirational sort of techniques, right? Do you know anything about that he might have shared with you? Or?
Yeah. Wim is a very adventurous guy. He always has been. He's got, I think, over 22 world records. And he is a wild guy. Just being around him, he's just such a free-spirited, in-the-moment, present kind of fella.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot of time in nature. His family spent a lot of time in nature. And he had studied the esoteric disciplines of Buddhism and meditation and yoga and pranayama. He had studied all that stuff at a very young age, gone visiting different places in the world. And then at one point he was walking through a park in Amsterdam, and it was a cold day, and he just saw this icy patch of water, and he just felt this magnetism. He just saw the sunlight glimmering off it,
Okay.
and he just felt this magnetism to go in it. So he just stripped his clothes off and hit the water. And as soon as you hit cold water, the first thing that happens is you start gasping for air.
Okay.
Automatically, your body just starts. And he noticed that breathing, the way his body was breathing. And as he stayed in, it started to calm down. And he learned something really valuable. And that is where he says he started developing the breathing method from.
Okay.
But it's also spoken about that Inner Fire, which is the name of Wim's company, is also, it can be translated into Jitumo, which is this Tibetan meditation. And the Tibetan Buddhists were known of having this practice where once a monk had gotten to a certain level, they would soak his robes in water and send him out to meditate in the mountains with soaking wet robes, and he would come back with dry robes. And it was through this inner fire meditation that they would do. So I don't know if Wim got some of it from that, or if it was, he always says nature was his teacher, but I know he studied the esoteric disciplines and he had a lot of nature exposure. And through that, he developed his own thing, which is the Wim Hof method. And it's 3 pillars, which are cold exposure, breathing, and mindset. Those are the 3 pillars that we focus on and that we train people on.
So when you start training with him, I imagine the first thing you would attack is mindset so that you can achieve the other 2 pillars? Or is it?
Yeah, they kind of all fall in conjunction with one another. The first thing I did is the breathing, and I think that's the entry point for a lot of people, because the mind is a challenging thing to wrangle on its own. When you do the breathing exercises in the Wim Hof method, you end up in a state that is very meditative and very clear and very focused. And it's unlike a feeling I've had from any other breathing exercise or any other pranayama. It takes me into a very peaceful, deeply meditative state. And it feels so good. When you finish a Wim Hof breathing session, you feel so good. You feel strong, you feel focused, you feel clear, and you feel like anxiety and nervousness and all that stuff is just really quieted down, and that overactive mind is just chilled out. So by getting your physiology right first through the breathing, then you automatically start creating the right mindset.
Sure.
And then you have the mindset, and by doing the breathing, you start training the mindset. And then through the mindset, then you start feeling like you have the clarity to go into challenging situations, like going and taking a cold shower, or going and taking an ice bath, or going out onto your balcony in shorts, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think the breathing is the place to start from.
Breathing, okay. And then what was your first experience with the cold with Wim? Was it an ice bath or a shower?
Yeah, my first experience was I went to one of his workshops. He came to Toronto and he did a workshop, and there was got to be over 100 people there, maybe 200. They had, so he did. Typically, what we do in a workshop is he goes through the history and the science of the method first. Then we did some exercises, just physical exercises to warm the body up. Then we did a huge breathing exercise. We did his breathing exercises guided by live music, which is another thing that we love to incorporate into our workshops. Something I always incorporate in my workshops is live music. Darren Austin Hall was there with his crystal bowls chanting while everyone was doing the breathing exercises. And then from there, we went into the ice bath. So he had these huge pools, because there was like hundreds of people there.
Yeah.
These 2 huge pools, like blown up, like full of ice that people would climb into. So that was my very first ice bath. I had done the cold showers a little bit, and I couldn't imagine, like when I stepped into the cold shower for the first time, I couldn't imagine getting that thing fully cold. Like I just went to where the red meets the blue on the dial, and that I was like, I have never been this cold in my life. How the hell does anyone ever get this all the way to full cold?
Yeah.
And then I went to that workshop. So once we all get into the ice, he got us to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So everyone would go in the ice water. We'd sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow with Wim, and then we'd get out. So it'd probably be about 30 seconds or something like that. That was my first time ever getting into ice. And that was enough to go, okay, I guess I can do this. So then I took his online courses. He's got 2 online courses. I took both of those that progress you into getting deeper and deeper into the cold showers till I got to the point where I could take a 5-minute cold shower with that thing fully on cold, or a 10-minute cold shower, and then spending more time doing ice baths and just gradually building it up. And that's what I suggest for people. When you start, it doesn't have to be full blown. Like Wim didn't start, he started with that little dip, and then he gradually built himself up. But he had been exposing himself to the elements of nature for a long time in his life. And that's what we have to do, is slowly start exposing ourselves to this stuff and gradually build up. I started with just my feet in the cold shower. So I would just, at the end of my warm shower, I would turn it to full cold and do 30 seconds just on my feet and just breathe as deeply as I could. Then after a few days of that, I would go up to my knees with the cold water. Then eventually I'd go up to my waist until I could get my full body in, and then start stretching the timing longer and longer.
Sure. Well, that's good advice to start in little bits and pieces and then work your way up.
Yeah, and you don't have to go for world records to get the benefits of the cold. Like the real benefits of an ice bath or a cold shower kick in around 2 or 3 minutes. That's where you get a lot of the anti-inflammatory effects and some of the growth hormone effects. So once you build up to that 2 or 3 minute mark, you're getting the health effects of it. And anything past that is kind of for fun or enjoyment or just for a challenge.
Sure.
But, you don't have to do an hour and a half in an ice bath in order to reap the health rewards.
Did Wim bypass that whole ice bucket challenge, or because he can?
Yeah, I know that. I wonder if that'll come back now that Wim Hof is catching on. But yeah, it'd be a whole other another level now. I did the ice bucket challenge. I got someone to dump the ice water on me, but it's so quick. It's just dunk and then it's over.
Yeah. With cold as a healing method, is there a way to measure it? Like you're saying, inflammatory sort of categories where cold can bring that temperature down, right? Is there a way to sort of measure that as you do maybe, cold showers or cold baths on a weekly basis?
To measure what it's doing for you health-wise?
Health-wise.
There may be ways to measure it by getting certain indicators checked through your doctor or something, but I think really overall is just to check in on your own well-being. Yeah. I know for myself, I just feel so much better. And I think most people that start doing the method regularly, that's enough evidence for them, is that they feel less stress in their life. They feel a greater amount of control, and they feel like they can react to stress better. That was the effects that it had for me, and how I knew it was working was just by doing the breathing at first. I noticed my general level of anxiety was dropping quite dramatically. And as I kept breathing, I just felt better, and I would arrive to work feeling like I was ready to take on the day. And then I started doing the cold showers, and then I felt even better. You wake up first thing in the morning, you do that breathing, and then you take a cold shower. Like there's nobody there. There's nobody watching you. Like you can talk yourself out of it so easily. Yeah. But if you do it, you've done something, and you come out and you walk into work like, I just held my breath for 2 minutes. I took an ice cold shower. Like, bring it on. I'm ready. I'm ready to take what the world's got for me. Yeah. And your level of confidence and competence just goes through the roof.
I guess it's a great morning ritual to have, right? To set the tone for the day that way.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great morning ritual. And I know because on days that if I go several days without doing it, I start to feel more sluggish and I start to feel more grumpy.
Yeah.
And then I do it, and then I'm reminded, oh yeah, that's why I put myself through this,
Sure.
because it makes me feel good. And in a world where we're surrounded by so much comfort, it's really important to make yourself uncomfortable consciously, to consciously step into those uncomfortable places, because then you can tolerate them. Because it's so easy to escape a moment now. It's so easy to just escape.
I think Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, first thing he does, he was saying, when he wakes up in the morning, he jumps into the lake, which is really close to his balcony.
Right.
Off the first floor. And that's his version of the morning coffee for him, right? To wake him up and, again, set the tone for the day.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's good. But we would advise people, if they are including this in their morning routine, just to check with the physician first in terms of heart rate, things like that, right?
If you have any serious health conditions, you should definitely check with a doctor before starting on any of this stuff. The major contraindications for the Wim Hof method in particular are Raynaud's syndrome. So people with Raynaud's should be very careful, should definitely talk to the doctor. It's a bit of a contraindication, and pregnancy. Pregnant people shouldn't start doing the breath work or jumping in the cold shower. But most healthy people are in good form to do it. And if you have any questions, check with your doctor before you go. And I really recommend the online courses or going to a workshop. I, of course, do workshops on an ongoing basis, and it's a lot of fun. It's like a 5-hour experience where people get to come and learn the history and the science behind the method in a really fun and interactive way, meet other cool and interesting people that are there.
Yeah.
Then we do the breathing session, we do a yoga session, all guided by live music, and then we have an opportunity to get in the ice together at the end.
Amazing. So you really don't need stimulants or relaxants, right? I mean, if you can utilize these methods in a natural way, in an alkaline way that's good for the body, it's better than, say, coffee or, some pill you might take to sleep at night or, etc. I mean, barring medical conditions, right? I mean,
it can be. That's a thing, that your body is already a pharmacy, and your breath can give you control over that pharmacy, over what hormones you're releasing, what endogenous things you're doing. Like, taking stuff is all exogenous, right? Outside of yourself, taking stuff to change the way you feel. And that's cool too. I'm not against that. There's definitely a time and place for that.
Yeah.
I'm Italian, man. I want to drink a latte once in a while, or I want to have a beer once in a while, So I don't think those things are wrong. It's just we can way overdo them.
Yeah.
And if you haven't yet learned how to do things endogenously, like do them from within yourself, it's really worth doing, because you can change your state without any other stuff. Yeah. And then you can find the balance you want. Maybe the balance you want is you're going to have 3 cups of coffee a week instead of 3 cups of coffee a day.
Sure.
Or to hell with it. I don't need coffee at all anymore because my breath makes me feel so good I don't need it. You know? But you can find that balance for yourself, and that's what I believe is every individual person has to find their own way. Just like there's no one right style of music, you got to find the style of music you like.
Sure. So I mean, if we went 20 years ago back in time, we went back to Humber, aside from practicing technique, composition, performance, song repertoire, we really should also be practicing exercise for good body posture. We should have good nutrition. We should be practicing our breath work and practicing being in the cold. So then when you get that outdoors gig in the winter, you're ready to go, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the mindset, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest things I think we struggled with at Humber was just like the fact that you were around all these amazing musicians all the time and you had to perform in front of them.
Yeah.
And talk about the inner critic. Like, we were being criticized constantly by our professors and by each other and all that kind of stuff.
Ourselves,
and of course ourselves, and I know that held me back in huge ways. Conversations I was having, about myself within myself. Yeah. And a more healthy attitude towards learning can go a long way.
For sure. And on the flip side of that, it's also good because it sets a good standard for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're not just taking anything face value. You're actually analyzing it, scrutinizing it, and trying to make it better for yourself and bring your own voice into it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Humber was pretty healthy overall. I'm not trying to diss Humber.
No.
I think like all our classmates, for the majority of the time, were pretty cool with each other, and most of the teachers were exceptionally cool in the way they did give their criticism.
Sure.
So yeah, not dissing it at all, but a healthy mindset could still be great service. I know, especially with the vocal people, they have a hard time, because for us, we had our instruments in front of us. It's like, yeah, you can insult my bass playing, but, it's a bass. It's not me. But vocalists, it was way harder for them.
Correct. You can hide behind the instrument, right?
Yeah.
With a vocalist, you're out there. You are the instrument. You're transparent. You're in front of everybody.
Yeah.
You have to lead the band.
Yeah, it's way easier to take it personally when it's your singing you're talking about.
That's amazing. Well, it's not too late. This is in hindsight, but we can practice it going forward, right? Like you're saying, become aware, get into the present moment, and then sketch out the design for whatever the feature is that you want it to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So thanks again for doing this. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach you for your courses or any advice?
Mm-hmm. I'm on Instagram just as Dan Coniglio, so just at Dan Coniglio, and that last name is spelled Coniglio. So you can find me on Instagram there, and you'll see lots of pictures of people in ice water and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and pictures of people climbing mountains in their shorts.
That's amazing.
Yeah, kind of fun. So yeah, that's probably the best place to find me, or I'm on Facebook just as Dan Coniglio. And I've got a workshop coming up at Float Valley in Markham on May 5th, Sunday, May 5th. We're doing a Wim Hof Method Fundamentals workshop at Float Valley in Markham.
Okay, amazing. So if anyone is local in the area can check it out. Definitely recommend it, especially after speaking with Dan on this podcast. So thanks again. It was great talking with you. And I know with each category we covered, we could have gone into more extensions about it. I'm sure there'll be future podcasts. So
yeah,
I wish you well. And if Toronto gets another deep freeze, I'm spending the night at your house. Okay,
right
cheers.
on, thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. Thanks.